young age, I knew school wasn't my thing. I think I was in second grade and I was already prescribed Vyvanse, which is way too young.
Wow.
I was getting pumped up with like 60 milligrams. I was like staring at the wall all day. And, my teachers they would bring me in for like parent teacher conferences and be like, your son's not going to make it through the year. Like he just can't get him to sit still.
Mm.
I'd be, every time the teacher would try and get me to learn about something, I'd always be like, well, why do you want me to learn about that? Like, why is this so important to me? Why can't we talk about, this may be the right way to do it, but there's other ways to do this. Let's think about that. Let's analyze it. Let's see how we can rethink this in a more creative way. And that pissed my teachers off. They couldn't stand it. I did terrible in tests. Like I said, I had severe ADHD. So, through lower school, my parents were worried. They're like, oh, what are we going to do with this kid? Middle school comes around, not much change, still kind of struggled. But they saw me start picking up the camera and they're like, all right, he's focusing on something at least, like he enjoys it. High school came around, still same thing, not always asking why, always being like, why is this what we're learning about? There's different ways of thinking about this. I was always interested in how we could change the thought or kind of change the narrative of how things were supposed to be presented. And that's why I was like, my history courses and stuff, because, as you know, history tends to repeat itself. You look at old events and you see the same stuff happening today. And so that was really where I was at with school. I had this really strange approach, super passionate about very specific things, ceramics. I dove into that and I, started a portfolio and it was just weird. It was a really visual kind of tactile thing that just worked in my brain. But yeah, so school was a mess. And, once I picked up the video stuff, my family they weren't about it at first. They definitely didn't support it. But once they saw how passionate about I was, willing to do anything, to film anything, they trusted me. It took a while, but yeah, I never fitted that mold. I didn't grow up with a ton of friends when I was younger. It really took me till like my late high school, early college years to reach that point where, people started to like me. I was too hyper, man. They couldn't, it was too much to handle sometimes. People were just like, dude, chill out. Like, you see it now, the way I talk. I just keep running.
Yeah. No, dude, I think it's so interesting. I relate to you a lot, man. I was always that asshole, just like being like, when am I ever going to need to know this? And like, why can't we do it this way? And like, why can't we do this? So yeah, dude, I relate to you. And it's a bummer because like, I went to private school too. And it's one of those things, it's like, I talk about it a lot on here, but it's part of the whole brand. But it's like, if you're not good at these core things, you're basically not shit. And so it's like someone like you, who's maybe more of like a tactile learner and maybe more, I think that's such a key thing at a young age. Like if you're starting to question why, like you've got this creative spark in you and like, it's a bummer when no one can kind of like capitalize on like, hey man, like Griff's really good at this. Like he might not be good at like the math and the science, but like he's like a a free thinker and he's like thinking about other stuff. And it's kind of a bummer that no one really like lets you know that that's a good attribute. And maybe it's not good for school, but it's going to help you in other ways. And so I'm glad that you were ended up like having that support down the line and your parents and people were kind of supportive, because I know that can be tough without a support system. If the schools are not supporting you, and then if your parents aren't supporting like you kind of going against the grain a little bit, it can be hard, man. So I just applaud you for staying the course and for doing that, because I definitely relate, and it's definitely not easy.
Of course, brother. That's just who I am, and I use that to my advantage. My ADHD is something I really, I've really thought about a lot. It's something that has hurt me a lot. It's also something that's helped me, and I've always looked at it as a duality thing. It's my worst quality, but it's also my best. When I was getting tested for my ADHD at a young age, they do all those visual tests,
Right.
room for like 5 hours for like 3 weeks with this therapist or whatever. And they were trying to figure me out, and they did all these tests, and my tests were all so low, except for this one. They're like, your son is a remarkable visual learner. They put the shapes and stuff in front of me, and I tested off the charts with that stuff. But everything else, I was really struggling in. And you take that and you throw it into the school-based curriculum, and they're like, oh, well, what the hell are we going to do with this kid? Like, he's not going to do anything. And it's interesting because we see today, at least I think, with all these really creative, not guys who don't fit the molds, you know, like Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, those guys like that who are doing these awesome things.
Right.
What I'm hoping is happening, or what I think is happening, is that the school system is starting to change the curriculum, at least for the younger kids, being like, hey, like let's support these other ways of thinking. Let's take, you know, let's put these kids in different classes and see what they can generate. And I'm hoping that really, you know, I'm hoping we see that result in 20 years from now when these kids are our age. You know what I mean?
Dude, I hope so too, man, because I think about all the people who like have all these skills and they're just like, you know, people say that they're bad or that they're like just not, you know, not good at school. And so they're just like, oh, I'm bad. And they carry that, but it never translates. Like for you, it translated. I would like to think for me, it translated. But the problem is like, there's so many people out there who were just told that from a young age and it just stuck with them the rest of their life. Like, bro, I don't know about you, but like, you know, I was always the dumb kid. And so I kind of like adopted that. I was like, you know, I was in the lower classes and I was like the bottom of the lower classes. So like, you know, all my friends, like I was known as a dumb kid and I fucking adopted that. And it's kind of bullshit because it's like, you know, I finally had the realization. I was like, I'm not the dumb kid. And that was like such a hard thing, but it was fucking like hammered into me. And so I think that that's something that's, it's very hard, but I think you're right. I think hopefully that there's like a change coming with that, you know, especially in the years to come.
Bro, man, like what you just said is the most relatable thing in the world to me, because I was constantly hammered this idea into my head that I was no good. One, because of school. Two, because I sucked at sports when I was growing up. And three, because I didn't have many friends when I was young, like lower school, middle school. I was made fun of a ton and stuff. So I just convinced myself, I was like, I'm just a loser. Like I got nothing going for me. And I think about it now and I wonder what I could have done if I didn't have that mindset. If I decided to be as resilient as I am now, with all the people who tell me I'm gonna fail now, you know, I'm like, work, tell me, look, I eat that shit up. Give me more of it. If I had that attitude when I was younger, I can't imagine where I'd be right now. Because you know, like you said, you had this feeling that you were just no good, and it's easy to think that way when everyone around you is telling you. And it's just wild to think about what I actually could have accomplished if I was resilient as I was today. So I totally agree with you there. I'm on the same page, man.